everyone. Welcome to this next episode of our ERP Center of Excellence series here. And just to let you know, this is a joint program that we put together in conjunction between Dynamics Communities, Community Summit North America, Acceleration Economy, and HandsFree ERP. And I'm joined again by Wayne Sadin, CIO of PriceSmart, Kenny Mulliken, CIO of Paragon Films, and Peter Jekyll, HandsFree ERP. And we're just talking about the things you need to consider and go through, steps you need to put in place, and tools and so forth that you need to understand around modernizing your ERP. And a lot of what we're talking about will be covered at the Community Summit North America, and something we'll be having there be a lounge available where many of you can stop by, chat, ask questions about what you need to understand and figure out about your ERP modernization. And one of those things that you've got to figure out is it's a simple tool that in a prior episode, Wayne highlighted about having a marker available because you'll need that handy for your whiteboard. But another simple thing, and could become very complex, is a checklist. Really, it's a checklist around your implementation and checklist around your training. And something, Kenny, I'd love to hear from you on is that you mentioned in the past that ERP modernization projects cannot be done as really like iterations due to the data, process realities of the project. So how do you go about, or how do you set an implementation checklist with your partners and then really execute these with your teams?
Yeah, it's true for us anyway. And I haven't yet met another company that their situation was such that they could do a little bit of the ERP system at a time. When we had a system that ran everything from sales to marketing to manufacturing, shipping, logistics, finance and accounting, all in one package already, we couldn't share it and have half in one and half in the other. So the trick there is that this is not really going to be an agile project, because you're not going to roll out a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more. If you didn't have any system whatsoever, then you might be able to just say start with finance and accounting. And so really it becomes this massive project that you need to know what are all the steps and what are the milestones that are going to happen. And so that's where our checklist is just like in a previous episode where we said you need to have a budget list of everything that you need. The same thing is also you need to have a list of all the requirements, and then from there you have to have a timeline. When is this getting tested? When is this getting rolled out? And so for us, that looked like things called conference room pilots. We had these places where the first conference room pilot was, okay, we're going to use the system with our data, but without any customization or really personalization done. This is just sort of out of the box ERP system. And then the next CRP is, okay, now we've changed it a bit to fit the needs, and then however many conference room pilots that you need to have along the way to make sure that you're taking the entire processes from end to end with all the people who are going to be using it, learning that. But then when it gets to training, that becomes kind of tricky, because if your training is too early, then people forget it. If you train somebody, if the project takes a year and a half, and near the beginning you give them all this training in how to use it, and then at some point a year later you go live, people aren't going to remember it. And so the training has to be closer to the end. But there's the other catch. If your training is too near the end, then the people who are getting trained that say, hey, excuse me, how do I do this? And you go, oh, shoot, we missed that. So again, you've got training at the right levels along the way, that it's early on enough that you can catch the things that you've missed and make sure that they're covered, but not so early that they forget everything. So that's the biggest thing I'd advise, is your checklist needs to go through all of the things that need to be completed and trained, but also what is the timing that would be appropriate for that.
Yeah, I like that, Kenny. And another, just to call this out, is that Community Summit's a great way to get folks trained on these systems, to get them up to speed. If you're in the middle of a project, get ready to kick one off. Hey, come learn all about these systems, the tips and tricks, features, functionalities of a system, so that can really help reduce some of that training time or refresh their memories, Kenny, if they kicked off early and then need a bit of booster in that training, so to speak, and then get you over that hump towards the end. Be a great way to do that. So, Wayne, as as folks are considering an ERP modernization project for, or as you are considering a ERP modernization for your company, what role do you play versus the partner in getting an implementation checklist in place? A lot of times, partner has their sort of standardized checklist, but the business. So here's our checklist of what we need to do. So, what do you consider there?
Well, unlike what Kenny said, you can't iterate through an ERP. You can iterate through a checklist. So if you go to the vendor to start with, one of these giant world-girdling companies, they have a checklist that covers every industry, every size company, everything. And then the partner, if you picked a good partner, knows your industry and knows the size of your company. If you're a $50 million company and you pick one of the big four, what I call that is an impedance mismatch. They're going to send more people to the meeting than you have in your company. That is not a good way to communicate. On the other hand, if you pick the 4-person company and you've got a giant bureaucracy, they might say, okay, you need to be at these 9 meetings at once. And you say, I only have 6 people. So you got to have a match. If you have a partner that knows what they need to know, then they can pare down the giant list from the generic vendor. And I'm going to highlight something Kenny said, because I've hired those people and been those people. If you don't have somebody, I'll call them the ringmaster, who can keep the partner, the other players, the vendor, and the client, the implementation company, in check, then you wind up being pulled by politics and strong personalities, and you need somebody with enough gravitas and organizational clout to say no, because the most important word to say in an ERP project is no. And you got to have somebody who can say it and know when to say it. So when you're making the checklist, if your partner has that person and can show you that person who's got the scars from having done it wrong and now knows what not to do, they can be embedded in your partner. I don't want to say it's always a separate person, but within the partner, everybody in the partner company is not that person. It's somebody like a Peter. It's somebody maybe like a Wayne. It's somebody that's got some of the gray hair and the experience and can go to the board and say X, or the CEO and say, let me explain what you're doing here. And so when you're making the checklist, again, it's what you take off the checklist and what you put on. And then, of course, it's the individual businesses. My business is unique because it operates in a country with a special law or a data privacy thing, or this is the custom of our industry and it's not normal in most industries. So it's about successively taking the giant list and then paring it down to the right size list, the smallest reasonable list, but no smaller. And so you can iterate through that, though. Go through it, come back again. What do we need to add? What do we need to take off? And I will also say, unlike an ERP that you can't do iteratively, you can add to the checklist when something new comes up, a new law. Yesterday, the SEC passed a rule about cybersecurity disclosure. The rule wasn't there when you made your checklist a month ago. Maybe you need a checklist item said, we need a process for declaring something. So you got to be flexible on that, but it's a key of having the pieces work together.
Yeah, I love that, Wayne. And Peter, Wayne and Kenny both bring up some interesting points here, but so let's kind of flip that around to your perspective. And what are most important priorities to both the implementation and training checklists that we brought up here, as far as where you get training, who's implementing what, and what are the priorities? And then quickly, where do most companies mess up in the process?
I'm going to make 2 quick points that piggyback on things that Wayne and Kenny have said. The lists are critical. And then something that Wayne brought up in a previous episode, those lists can be imported into a tool that comes free with your Dynamics implementation called DevOps, where you can list out all of those tasks, assign them to different people, whether they're internal or external, and use that as the central core of truth of who is due what at what time. And since it's public, everybody knows who's slacking and who's keeping up on things. And as Wayne said, you can iterate completely through that list. It's free. It's a great tool. Get those requirements, stick them in that tool, keep everybody accountable. And then the second thing, I'm just going to make great points from Wayne and Kenny on the training. I'm just going to add 1 point. Another hidden cost where proposals catch you is the train the trainer trick. Oh, we don't need all these hours to train your people. We'll train the trainer. As soon as that project goes down the track halfway, the people that are going to be the trainers are so busy with the implementation and their day job that the idea of them being the folks to train your folks becomes completely ridiculous. Train the trainer, another one of those hidden traps I see in the proposal.
Yeah, I like that, Peter. It's something to really consider and think about. And also, how much time can your people of the internal company team really truly invest? So like it's been highlighted, hey, yeah, we can help with this implementation and we can do these things on the checklist, but then lo and behold, you figure out how much time it takes to do those items on the checklist. You got to check that with reality, is where I always like to say to the reality versus the proposal of what's out there. Well, fellas, it's been a interesting conversation, and thank you so much for chatting around. Really, again, prioritizing things, having a checklist, getting them done to meet your end goal, but more importantly, also making sure that the right people are trained at the right times leading up to a successful launch of your ERP and modernization efforts. So, Peter, Wayne, Kenny, thank you so much.